Eagle, Part 3, Serpent, Chapter 2. Sergeant Elmo Woods peered through the lens of the thermal imager, then looked back at the computer display screen bolted to the rocky shelf. The screen put together the thermal, radar, and quantum scan images together to show a stretch of the asteroid belt. He could see Jupiter about 1 AU, or about 6 light minutes away, in the background. He sharpened the resolution and was able to focus on the cloud structure. There was the famous red spot, a storm that had been raging for longer than he had been alive. He increased the magnification and was able to actually see the outer edge of the storm slowly rotating counterclockwise. Of course, it only looked slow from this distance. He readjusted his position, switching from sitting to crouching. He was better able than most people he knew at enduring long periods in a combat spacesuit. But after 2 days in this cramped hide site, dug out of the surface of an asteroid just 0.25 clicks from the MDL, he was ready to get back to a pressurized environment. When he was in a spacesuit, especially after a long surveillance, even the crowded cabin of an RCC seemed like a vacation in comparison. He blinked his eyes and turned his attention back to the reason for the mission. The large asteroid that was hanging in space just a half-click over the MDL, the one that was hiding at least 2 wings of Triton fighters and an unknown number of soldiers, troop carriers, and possibly long-range bombers, and who knew what else. Fleet Command had given the illegal Triton post the designation of Tango Bravo 1, and was so far keeping it a secret from the general public back on Earth. Elmo CO had even told them that the Chancellor had taken a special interest in the Triton base and Lieutenant Nelson's capture. Elmo had spotted and recorded all the regular Triton traffic inside this section of the DMZ, traveling up the corridor from their side of the asteroid field up to the Joint Security asteroid. He'd also noticed the Triton troop carriers bringing the rotations of soldiers to the observation posts and towers that they manned on asteroids on their side of the military demarcation line, also known as the MDL. But all of that was in accordance with the Armistice. Ever since the capture of Lieutenant Nelson, the Tritons had been very well behaved, especially around the big asteroid with the hidden military facility. And while Elmo and Sergeant Baxter and Sergeant Westmore kept watch from their hide site, other Republic assets were deploying to try to locate any other hidden Triton platforms in the DMZ. But Elmo doubted their chances of finding more. Lieutenant Dean Mitchell and his team had been more than lucky when they located the Triton base, and now that the Tritons knew that the Republic fleet was aware of their Armistice violation, they were no doubt going to be extra careful at keeping their assets hidden. The Admiral in charge of the Republic delegation to the JSA had called for an emergency meeting with the Triton representatives a day after Lieutenant Nelson was captured. But the last Elmo heard, the Tritons didn't even respond until they sent an alphanumeric signal protesting a Republic spy's presence on their territory. Elmo hadn't gotten much of a chance to get to know Lieutenant Nelson before he was captured, but he shuddered to think what he was going through and thought he'd probably be better off if he was already dead. The man was from Sierra, so he probably had a great deal of classified information in his head. So the Tritons would probably try to keep him alive as long as they were able to extract information. But who really knew what the Tritons did with human prisoners? A handful were captured during the war when their long-range surveillance skiffs strayed too far into Triton space. They were never heard from again. "Sergeant O'Connor, you see that?" Sergeant Baxter asked. He was sitting on Elmo's left, looking through the lens of his sniper rifle through a different hole in the shell of the asteroid. Elmo turned his imager in that direction. Sergeant Baxter had spotted something to their solar south, about a half a click away from the surface of G16 Alpha, the Joint Security asteroid. Elmo adjusted the magnification. He saw movement in the Kelmy crater. the joint security area itself. A 3 Republic vehicle convoy was approaching Checkpoint Alpha. A staff car and 2 tactical wheeled Army transports stopped outside the quantum fence that surrounded the crater and drove into overwatch positions while the staff car proceeded through Checkpoint Alpha. The staff car drove down the metal switchback ramp to the floor of the crater and then went up to a small parking area just outside the fence that surrounded the Armistice Talks compound in the center of the crater. Elmo noted that there were at least a company of infantry in overwatch positions on the Republic side of Kelmi. There was also a visible presence of soldiers on the grounds of Guard Post Milhako. "Is something scheduled to happen today?" Sergeant Westmore asked. He had been dozing, but when he sensed something was going on, he woke up completely. He started monitoring the radio for any traffic. "Well, we all knew Fleet Command has been wanting to talk to the Triton delegation for weeks now. Maybe it's going to happen today," Elmo said. He turned his optics towards the Triton side of the crater. He saw a dismounted patrol of Triton soldiers moving along a ridgeline about 1,000 meters away from the MDL. 2 of the Tritons had some extra gear on their helmets, and Elmo had to further focus his magnification to see that they were wearing their multispectral observation headsets. The Tritons were a lot better at long-range observation on the move than humans were. Elmo knew the soldiers at Milhako were already observing all the uncamouflaged Tritons in the asteroid. He turned the dial on the side of the thermal imager to look for heat signatures. The Triton soldiers were pretty good at masking their heat signatures, and they were pretty good at scattering surveillance radars, and they were pretty good at hiding from quantum particle observation nets. But they couldn't hide from all 3 at the same time. That was when an experienced scout like Elmo really earned his money. By fine-tuning his imager and moving slightly between the 3 observational technologies, he was able to locate 3 static camouflage Triton observation positions just outside the crater rim. The trick was to find the right balance and avoid spending too much time on either the radar or quantum particle settings, because neither of those methods were passive, and if he remained on either one too long, the Tritons would be able to triangulate his position. Elmo dictated the coordinates of the positions to Sergeant Westmore, who passed the coordinates on to Camp Boniface over the radio. "Here we go," Sergeant Baxter said. "Triton Tunnel Entrance 3, Sergeant O'Connor." Elmo kept his imager focused on one of the Triton groups outside the crater and picked up his trinoculars and looked at the big metal half-circle tube that stuck into the wall of the crater on the Triton side. There were 7, 8, 9 Triton soldiers emerging, their metallic armor reflecting sunlight. They each had a sash across their torsos. 8 wore red and 1 wore black. It was the Triton infantry's version of a dress uniform, and the black sash designated that one a squad leader. Then 2 more Tritons emerged, but these weren't infantry. They wore black robes and hoods, their faces hidden in shadows. As Elmo focused on one of them, he saw 2 red glowing eyes and a glint of black metal. They were wearing respirators that covered their entire heads under their hoods. So far, no one human had ever gotten a look at what the Tritons really looked like. The enemy delegation descended the wide stairs at the entrance to the tunnel and made their way toward the fence that surrounded the Armistice Talks compound. On the Republic side of the crater, the staff car parked on a small rectangular area of macadam just outside the Armistice Talks compound. A pair of Republic MPs, both in dress uniforms and armed with only rail pistols strapped to their side, opened the gate as the Republic delegation emerged from the staff car. It was made up of 2 people, an admiral and a female commander. The compound itself consisted of 11 buildings, 2 large, oddly shaped ones on the Triton side and 3 small ones on the Republic side, and 6 that straddled the actual military demarcation line which bisected the compound. The Republic delegation disappeared into a building on their side, and the Triton delegation went into a building on their side. probably to review their notes and make last-minute preparations for the meeting. It was only the second time Elmo had observed an Armistice meeting, and it was probably the first for Baxter and Westmore. "I wonder if this is a good thing or a bad thing," Westmore said, his voice sounding tinny over the radio microphone in his helmet. He brought a set of trinoculars out of his rucksack and attached a cable to a small black box on the bottom of the trinoculars and hooked the other end of the cable to a digital recording device. Then he took a position at a rectangular aperture at the right end of the hide site. "Stay on the meeting, Westmore. Baxter, remember, we need to be watching for any activity around Tango Bravo 1, Elmo said. "Roger that, sir," Baxter replied, still peering through the scope of his sniper rifle. Despite the lack of apparent activity, surveillance duty could be one of the most exhausting jobs for a soldier, and in a situation like this, Elmo thought to himself, it could be one of the most tense.